So, why are we here? We are interested, Ancient Shed is interested, and I hope most of you are, in a prosperous and sustainably prosperous city region. For us, our contribution to that is economic growth. We want economic growth to sustain, we want it to be good, proper, and we want it to be inclusive. And it's mostly for us about creating jobs. A lot of work has gone in to startups. What we're interested in now is, once you've created startups, is how you scale those companies. The Scale Up Institute, so I'm getting a bit of feedback here. The Scale Up Institute, which some of you may have heard of, published a report which identified a number of potential gaps in an ecosystem that can slow down scale-up activity. Leadership, talent, access to finance, access to markets and infrastructure. Our focus this year, if you like, is about the leadership piece. What does it take to lead a company as it grows? And another angle of that is where you find people to bring into your company at that leadership level. This afternoon we're going to focus on three entrepreneurs who have grown, scaled and exited businesses. I've particularly chosen people who have exited their businesses. Not that, exit is a whole topic in itself, as the rights and wrongs and whys and wherefores. But of course, the opportunity here is for our three esteemed colleagues to reflect on the learnings of the journey they've been on. And that is the important thing that we want them to share with you so that you can build on that for whatever path you're taking. This is part of a series of events focused on Scale Up. So we're going to listen to three CEOs today. Our next event that you'll see here is a different type of leadership, civic leadership. We have, for those of you who don't know, we have an election coming up on the 4th of May. Please do come in for a mayor for our combined authority. Bristol, South Gloucestershire, Bath and North East Somerset. Huge opportunity to take this city region to the next level. So we are hosting here a hustings for specifically focused on the creative and tech sectors, but we've merged it, called it Createch because it really is one. Doesn't mean that everyone's welcome to that, but the focus will be creative tech. So please do register for that if you can make it. That's a morning event. Okay, so the format for this afternoon will be, we've got three speakers. I'm going to go ask each to speak in turn. Heather for 10 minutes, Toby for 10 minutes, and Ben for 10 minutes, with 5 minutes gap in between for you to ask questions, and then we'll open it to dialogue. So we're going to stick rigidly to time. That's what I like doing, that's my job. But of course, the onus is on you to ask some questions, because if no one asks any questions, these people feel like they've failed. So I hope that's clear. So over to you, Heather.
Can I borrow your mic?
Yeah, Bill.
This is all working okay? Can you hear me? I don't think I've ever managed to actually speak and keep it to 10 minutes. So hence, these are probably more for my age memoir than they are actually for yourselves. I just want to start off really by giving you a little bit of flavour of my background.
So, I think...
Is it on?
Should be on.
I think it's on.
Yeah. Just need to keep it close to that.
No problem. A little bit of flavour of my background, where I've come from and what made me start the business that I actually started, and just sort of a flavour for that business to start with. So if we start off, I didn't have a private school education. I was in a fairly rough school within Bristol, and I was the only person in my year that actually went to university. Now, lots of entrepreneurs don't even go to university, but very lucky I had that support, and I decided, against my parents' best wishes, who wanted me to be an accountant or a doctor or a solicitor, to go into teaching, which at that point in time was probably not their favourite aspiration for where I was actually going. I went into teaching, but I always wanted to own a sports car. And I realised fairly soon that actually being in teaching and having a sports car was quite difficult to actually achieve. So I was always looking for something to do that would enable me to be maybe a bit more entrepreneurial. I dreamed of inventing something, but could never quite think of something that hadn't already been invented. That led to me establishing Lifetime, and Lifetime really came out of, I guess, things that I enjoyed doing, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But Lifetime was established in 1995. It was a training group, initially within health and fitness, within the apprenticeship sector. In 2011, just to give you sort of a picture of the whole story, we partially sold that to Sovereign Capital. So Sovereign Capital, a private equity business, they bought into the company in 2011. And at that point in time, the business was doing just shy of 8 million EBITDA at that point in time. And there were 400 staff and around about 10,000 learners that we were actually looking after per year at that point in time. So it took quite a while to get to that stage, and I'll come back to that in terms of the growing pains in a minute. Over that time, over the next 5 years, I transitioned from being CEO to exec chair and then to non-exec director, because the ambition was always to exit the business fully alongside Sovereign. And I'm pleased to say that we did that in October last year, by which point the business was delivering just over 15 million EBITDA, 850 staff, and over 20,000 apprentices per year. So sort of a view in terms of that scaling, a lot of it came at the later point. Early on, it took a lot longer to actually get the business going. Since 2011, I guess I've taken on different roles, and appropriate in terms of scaling a business, because scaling the business as I did with Lifetime has been very different than some of the other roles I've taken on since that point in time. So I've chaired a turnaround business, very different, and also got involved in investing in businesses and non-exec roles, and I guess the entrepreneur in me established 2 further businesses over the last couple of years. But what I'm going to focus on is obviously that scaling side, and just look back to Lifetime and what happened with that. So, in the beginning, why did I get into that? Well, I, as a teacher, was a sports teacher, and in the evenings I used to teach aerobics. And it was at the time, many, many years ago, just before David Lloyd came to Bristol, and many of the other health clubs that are brand names today were actually around. And it was a great, fun industry to be in. There was lots of energy about it, there were lots of great parties, but also just the whole way that industry was changing. It was fun to be around. And that's what attracted me to that industry to start with. I loved what I was doing, I loved teaching the aerobics in the evenings, and then it was about how could I actually take that a little bit further. In taking that further, there was a clear need that sports clubs, fitness clubs needed trained, qualified staff. They were getting very good at pre-selling. They could pre-sell a club before it even opened. But what they then found is that they were losing people just as quickly. And so that idea of having trained people to make sure that they were safe when they exercised became really important. And I began to get involved in some of the development of qualifications, so national qualifications that would actually enable people to get a recognised qualification. And that really was when Lifetime started. And the Whitbread Hotel Company, I got a lovely consultancy contract, and that was the fantastic time where I was actually quite well paid. So I came out of teaching, thought this is fantastic, I don't have to work sort of the same hours as the children do. I can actually go to the shops outside of the school holidays. And that consultancy was brilliantly paid. But what happened over a period of time was that Whitbread had lots of money to start with, and then they went through a phase of cost cutting, and then said, that training programme is exactly what we want, but we've got no money to pay for it. So, a bit of a challenge. What we did was we found some funding that was available, and that funding was available through training and enterprise councils, and it was funding for apprenticeships. So I stumbled on apprenticeships very much by accident, and investigated them and looked at could we actually use those for Whitbread. Which point they said, fantastic, great solution, but we don't want to hold any government funding. So that really was the start of Lifetime, when we started to recruit people to deliver that training and actually took the funding contract in our own right. One of the things that I was asked to talk about was culture. And at the beginning, bear in mind that we were in a fun industry, so it tended to attract people, it tended to be younger, lots of energy, and liked that partying atmosphere. So pulling them together was really important. And what we did was we looked at what the values were in terms of how we liked to work and the work that we were doing. And we came up with the Lifetime Spirit values: supportive, passionate, inspiring, rewarding, innovative team. And they were central to what we did as we grew that business. So those were established when we only had 10 people, but we kept those values and tried to work on ways to keep those alive as we actually took the business forward. And I think as you scale a business, that's something to always think about, is how do you keep your culture and your values alive? Sometimes you've got the time to do that in the beginning, but as you hit that growth stage, there's so much to think about. But keeping that team together and really keeping them aligned in where you want to go, certainly for me as I grew Lifetime, was really important. One of the things I learned really early on was about cash flow. You grow in a business, you're constantly up against it in terms of getting that cash in. And the number of times that I was towards the end of a month thinking, is that cheque going to arrive, and am I going to actually be able to pay salaries? And you realise those responsibilities that you've got in terms of it's not just you paying bills, it's your whole team and they're relying on you. So that became incredibly stressful. And again, to give you an idea, I remortgaged my house 3 times as I was growing the business. I don't think that the business would have actually survived if it hadn't been house prices were going up very nicely to enable me to do that. So in some ways I was very lucky. The circumstances enabled me to actually do that and to get the money into the business that enabled it to actually keep going. But we also had a really lucky break. And that lucky break was the Training and Enterprise Council changed the way that they actually paid you. And they brought it a month earlier. And that difference between getting paid a month and a half after you've delivered to half a month after you've delivered made all the difference to the business in terms of us being able to grow and grow very rapidly. So cash flow, really important. Learned the lessons early on, had many sleepless nights early on. But in terms of coming out of that, I guess, the 3 things that I learned as I went along and were really important to getting that business on a stable footing. Firstly, using Excel. It was a very basic financial model. I guess I was lucky my background was actually mathematics, so it just helped a little bit in terms of doing that. But understanding the numbers, understanding what the key drivers were, was really important for me in terms of making the right decisions in the business. I went on a course, Finance for Non-Financial Managers. That proved invaluable, especially later on when you've got a bigger business, you've got an FD telling you certain things, and you need to be able to interrogate that. So a really useful course. If you haven't done one, I very much recommend getting to grips with all the different financial instruments in a business.
Yeah.
And staying ahead of the growth curve. So I was continually worried about, have I really got the skills to lead a business of this size? And I was learning as I was going along. And I was constantly pedaling under the water in terms of getting the skills and the knowledge to actually feel comfortable leading that organisation in a safe way. So I did a couple of things over the years. One was I did an Open University MBA. I hate to say it, I didn't actually finish it. I didn't do the assignments, but the actual course was fabulous in terms of looking at things like strategic direction and how you build that business over a period of time. And I also did a 2-week course at Cranfield University just on strategic leadership. And they were really useful. I know when you're growing a business, you are pedaling very fast just to keep up all the time. But to be able to take that time out and actually reflect on where you are and learn from it was quite important at the time. Now, this is where I've gone wrong. There should be 2 lovely pictures here. And that was just in terms of early learnings, I guess, some other little things. I learned very early on, luckily we had an early audit, that signatures on paperwork were really important. And if you had the pictures here, it would show it turning into some pound notes. And in our world of funding, that was really important. So we had people within the business really passionate about what they did, loved teaching, really engaging. We were getting fantastic feedback from the learners, but their paperwork was not always the best. And luckily we found out really early on that that was really important. And so what we did about that, and again, apologise about the pictures, what it would show here is a computer and the outputs in terms of growth. We made sure that we put technology in that actually drove that whole administrative process. And I guess took some of the challenges away from the people so that they could go out there, be really buzzy, be great at what they're doing, but simplify the things that go behind it. But also, it meant as managers, we had that visibility. So if we didn't have a signature on something, or didn't have confirmation that a learner had attended a session, we had that red flag such that we could chase that up and make sure that that wasn't actually going to be an issue. I've got something on this slide. Really? Okay. Just pulling it together then, I was asked to focus on culture. That whole bit about establish your vision. If you've got a team of people, they need that vision, they need that clarity in terms of where you're going. That will change over time, but you just need to keep working on that and then engaging their hearts and minds in terms of delivering that. We were able to drive margins within lifetime of over 25%. A lot of our competitors were only driving margins of 10% or less. And the reason that we could do that is the hearts and minds of the people in that business and their focus on driving the results and the outcomes for learners. But it was also about the technology and simplifying things down. That culture's got to be driven by the leaders in the business. It doesn't just happen. It has to be lived and breathed every day. We made sure that we had a company conference each year where we talked about different things and we refocused on that vision. We had Spirit Awards, which rewarded people that showed those spirit values. And we also had Ski Trip, which if you ask anybody in Lifetime will tell you is the best bit about being at Lifetime. I hasten to add we didn't take 850 to the end, but we did take a lot more at the beginning. And it was a great way of getting people to really buy into the business and also just to be able to listen to them, get their feedback, get their ideas in a very relaxed setting so that they get to know people, they share ideas, and you can then take those back and actually work on those. And the most important time to do that listening, to do that motivating of them is when things aren't going well. Not just to celebrating the success, but when things aren't going well, your job as the leader really is to pull people out of that, realign them, refocus on the vision, so that you can take that one forward. So in summary, establish it and keep developing a clear shared vision. Understand your numbers, really critical, so you don't get as many sleepless nights as I actually got on my process. Make sure you've got all KPIs in the business so you can see what's going on, spot problems as early as possible. Keep looking for better ways to do things. Don't sit back and just think it's fantastic, it'll be great forever and a day. Everything needs reinvention. And you don't have to be a tech business to actually use tech. So thank you very much. I've just about
Okay, keep the mic on. A couple of questions for Heather, please.
I'm just interested in the impact that Sovereign Council had. So what was it like bringing private equity? How did that change the business?
We did quite a bit of preparation for that. And I think from my own perspective, again, it's the first time I'd actually dealt with private equity. So we did a lot of research. We got some horror stories and we got some very positive stories. And I guess I went into it with a view that I was going to exit in those 5 years. I think if you go into it where it's still your baby and you want full control, there are going to be surprises along the line. So actually, working with Sovereign's been very positive. They've asked me to chair one of their other businesses, which was a turnaround. So the relationship hasn't hasn't been too bad there. But it is very different, and very happy to catch up afterwards if you want to talk about more of that experience.
Hi, thanks for your story.
Speak up a bit.
Could I ask how, in hindsight, you would have accelerated that earlier stage. It took, what, 15 years, was it?
Yeah, the early stages were quite slow. It was almost a 10-year lifestyle business. And I think I just didn't have the experience or the exposure to the financial modelling, and I guess to experts to actually help accelerate that growth in those stages. From around about 2003, 2004, the business then sort of went on a pretty steep growth curve. So before we actually sold to Sovereign, 3 times we've been in the Virgin Fast Track 100 awards. And it was that strategy, it was taking the time out to sit back, really think about what you're trying to do, and then set yourself goals and measure yourself against them. That sort of changed the whole meander along to, okay, we're putting our foot on the accelerator now.
One more before the ad break.
How do you balance transparency and telling people only what they need to know to keep them on track? Because being too transparent with stuff that people who work for you don't need to know, that can be a challenge or always.
No, absolutely. And I guess there's 2 situations, because for me, when I was growing the business, originally you share lots of things, numbers and everything with everybody within that business. And then as you start to sort of pull back a bit as the business grows, people then feel that they're then being left out. So having good communication, I think, is really important, and making sure you're still communicating, but you may change those messages. The other example for me would be the turnaround business that I'm chairing. That had huge issues. It literally had a 4 to 5 million hole in funding that we identified and had to pay back. And now the messaging around that for people that were really concerned about losing their jobs, that I think I would very much err on honesty is your best policy, but be honest, but give them the solution and tell them that there is light at the end of the tunnel and how you're all going to work together to achieve that. I think if you don't, the danger is somebody else will tell them. So when you're in that situation, honesty, but equally have the strategy and have the vision to get out of it.
Brilliant, love it. Okay, do you want to pass that to Toby? Thank you very much, Heather. So, great story. We're going to hear a different one now, but before we do, the first of our 2 ad breaks, and that is a reminder that afterwards, after this, Set Squared Connect, networking and drinks and pizza. The pizza is only for those who booked. If you want to stay and didn't book, then there isn't any pizza for you, sorry. So that's the ad break. Toby.
Okay, well, thank you, Nick. And I think that some of what I'm going to share may overlap with what Heather said. Strangely enough, it seems there are some magic formulas in business, culture being one of them. So I'm Toby Hughes. I founded a business, I've been working in technology for about 15 years. I got stuck in financial technology in 2003 after being a sound engineer before that, and doing gigs all over the world. And I joined this internet startup thinking it was a media company that happened to be in finance, thinking it was all very .com, and then somehow found myself right in the middle of this stuffy finance industry. And strangely found I was very good at marketing mortgages for some reason. So, built a businesses through the recession. That business went south because it was in mortgages, and which was unfortunate. And in January 2011 was sort of spat out and decided to, of the previous firm, and decided to found my own business. I was fixated on the idea of putting the customer in the middle of the financial world and making the world revolve around them. And so we went on a journey, and so literally I started the business in my study and took on my first employee, and we sat there and we're like, right, how are we going to make money? We've got this idea of, it was about better lead generation, better consumers in the middle, better financial planning. Launched a website called Independent Financial Advisor, which taught us an awful lot about different types of IFAs and clients' expectations, but ultimately we realised that fundamentally people want to understand the deep question, am I going to be okay? And so we saw some models in the US to do with investment and to do with personal finance management, and so we decided to combine them and try and create the ultimate kind of IFA in your pocket, which could integrate with all your finances, all the banks, investment companies, and give you your own cash flow management tools and all of those things. So it wasn't small, and we were, unfortunately, and so we didn't have a lot of money. We self-funded, as part of the business, we set up an agency in there, which worked with banks marketing their insurance products and finance products and credit cards, and that funded the business through the early stages. And we really took every penny we had out of that business, and some we didn't have, in the sense that I had my credit cards maxed out, whilst we hunted for the for this ability of understanding what the interface was that could truly unlock people's finances, because we saw in the US the market was exploding in what's now termed fintech. Back then it was, I'm not sure it had a title actually, but that concept of innovation was very difficult when you don't have a traditional business. There isn't a model that you can follow necessarily. You're genuinely going after a market which doesn't exist. Where are your anchor points, your data points? You try and create business models, financial models. There are assumptions based on assumptions based on assumptions. They're not necessarily correct. So we basically got to a point where we ended up we raised about $500,000 in investment, and then we needed to do a Series A. Our competitors in the US were doing $50 million rounds, oversubscribed. We were struggling to raise $1 million, and we ran a joint Series A sale process in that time, and we ended up getting acquired. We sold the business to Africa's second largest insurance company, a company called MMI Holdings, or Momentum, as their brand is in the UK, and that for us unlocked a lot of capital. So we sold the business in terms of all of the share capital, and we became employees of that business, and were then effectively were corporate ventured, I suppose, for the next 2 years. So I went from being running a business of 25, I think we were at the time when we got taken over, to being a CEO of a division of a 17,000 strong global corporate, and scaling that business quite hard in that, which were very different. Literally, it was like night and day. So Nick today asked me to talk a bit about innovation and how you enable innovation through startups, and really the Royal Marines have a phrase which is the 7 Ps, which is proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance, which ideologically I love that idea that you can plan your way to the destination. I've got 3 Ps, and because I'm dyslexic, one of them starts with an F. So the first one really is people, and the only advice I can give you is hire a great team. I know the old adage, but if you're going to go on a difficult journey, you want A-grade people around you, and they need to be energized, not on the hours that they're doing, but on the problem you're solving and the journey. And it comes back to culture. If you have a team that's totally focused and aligned with you, you will probably succeed in something. It may not be what you're doing at the moment, but you will succeed at something, because they're a great team, will pull you through. The second is your investors. The people you bring onto your company is a bit like getting married. They have a say over what the furniture looks like and what it does. You get the wrong investors, that can mess up the whole company. And there's some businesses I've seen I've got involved with post selling my company, and they're in all kinds of trouble because they've got the wrong style of investor, and it's a real problem. And they put millions of dollars in, and And the founder's going, but we like this. And the investors are going, we want earnings. And it's difficult because they're not on heading in the same direction. And I think the other side of people really is the culture around how you attract and retain staff. For us, we did all kinds of things. We thought, right, being a .com company, how do you attract the right people? Because most of the best people aren't looking for jobs. So we ran things like hackathons, which we solved set problems. We paid for all the beer and pizza, and we got loads of people. And actually, some of the most talented guys we hired out of those things, because we met teenagers who were hacking their own lighting systems and doing all these great projects for technology that didn't want to go to university. And actually, they started, and very quickly they were leading teams themselves. We fostered a culture of, we used Scrum and Agile methodologies in development, and we fostered a culture that we tried as hard as possible to create a flat culture, which there was leadership, but that was mostly around seniority and wisdom rather than necessarily I'm telling you what to do. And we tried to communicate quarterly objectives that the business would hit, so both financial, it was really important everyone was tied to the money, but also around productivity. And when you're trying to build something no one's ever done before, look, let's share. So every week, every Friday, people would show what code they'd created, and we tried to celebrate success and those things. And we fostered an environment where we hired a lot of talented people, and they then brought their mates along. And that, I don't advocate that necessarily, but when you're looking for people who are quite rare in their talent base, often they know who else is best in the industry. And when they start talking positively about your company, you start attracting some very, very talented people. And it doesn't become, we didn't pay the best in the market, we attracted some of the best people. So, and that's because our environment was a great place to work. My FP is focus with purpose. The focus part is you need to know where you're going. At the end of the day, if you build a business, you've got to have some guiding areas and direction. You need to be ruthless about that. Lots of people, we suffered because we did too many things a lot of times. We should have been more ruthless, but the purposefulness behind what we were trying to do, for me in the early stages it was slightly easier because the goal was really set. I wanted to build a business to sell. And when that moment came along, I knew that's what I was going to do. And so therefore, all of the metrics I needed to achieve to get to that point, we were focused on those. The other thing is momentum within the business. If a startup loses momentum, you're screwed. If you start to drift, you start to get this kind of... startups are predicated on the whole thing of getting somewhere. Lifestyle businesses are slightly different, and if you're interested to talk about that, but I think startups are generally you have 3 years to get to a certain point, 5 years to get to maturity. But if you I've met quite a few startups that have got to 8 years plus, and they're drifting because they've lost that energy. The founders get bored, or people want to move on, and it's just so momentum is a really key part. And the last point is really about your personal life. Sounds a bit fluffy and HRy and everything else, but if you as the leader lose yourself, your business is going to flounder. So for me, I had a mentor who was brilliant. He was quite ruthless with me, but he was great. Personal life in terms of family. Why are you bothering doing this? There are loads of great TED Talks on know your why. Watch them. They're really good. Because why you get into business, if you lose sight of why you're actually doing this, I mean, it's hard. It's masochistic almost, in the sense that this is stressful, painful. I got a stomach ulcer through the process. It was the most stressful thing. We came within hours at one point of running out of money, couldn't meet payroll. I mean, why do this? I could have been working for a nice salary, working for a nice job, but I would have been bored. But the point is that for me, that if my wife wasn't behind me on this, that would have been difficult. For family, all those reasons. But your personal life is key because you are human. And although we love to celebrate people who possibly are borderline psychopaths, as many CEOs are, and many of the Silicon Valley people, you think, oh, it's going to be like this, it's like that. But actually, when you scratch below the surface, the price they have paid is high to get to where they got to. Many of them on 3rd, 4th, 5th marriages, and you're like, actually, is that the price that's worth paying for this? Because actually, and so count your costs, know your why are you in business, and once you get to the other side, probably you'll only realise whether or not the price you paid was worth it for it. And so anyway, so just to recap then, so it's people, focus with purpose, and your personal life.
Thank you very much. Okay, time for the next ad break. VentureFest. Some of you may have been to VentureFest in, when was it? February? Come on, someone help me out. Is it February? So there's a whole series of events going through the year. The culmination is the 17th of October, and there's a whole series of events, and there's some flyers just on the table there. So pick up one of those on the way. A couple of questions for Toby.
Hi Toby, I'm Chris, co-founder of My Nanobite. We're a tech AI startup, and you hit some really good points on talent acquisition. Every business has that challenge, but especially STEM subjects. You've hit the ball out of the park for how to acquire them, great Hacknet for example. So my next question would be, what would be your thoughts on how we can hit the root cause of generating more talent from the get-go for STEM?
What for your business specifically, or the wider industry as a whole?
Wide industries.
Well, I think people get involved in things generally because of aspiration, and so I think lots of people I know do give stuff back, go into schools, find talented people. There is an element of within the coding community certainly that if kids are interested in coding, that they don't wait to start a job. They're coding, and so part of, I suppose, this place's job and part of the companies here collectively need to start to try and find ways of attracting those kids, getting those kids into forums, and so they can understand what's possible for them. So there's one guy called Jamie who was, we met him. He was very, very talented. He was, I think he was 18 or 17, and he joined and he was a level 1 developer. Very quickly became a level 2 developer, and he was probably one of our brightest coders. But he kind of, when you met him at this hackathon, he turned up. He was already doing all these different. He was involved in this project. He was very self-motivated. But when he saw what was possible, and he was put under more senior developers, they kind of honed him, and he was able to really accelerate. So part of that is, I think, is the aspiration, and how that aspiration gets into younger guys is key. On the other end of the scale, my CTO was a maths genius and picked up coding 2 years before, and he happened to come from a leadership background, so it doesn't have to come from the teenagers. He had one of those brains, unfortunately, well, fortunately for me, but actually he switched into coding from another career and just found it easy. He said, which really annoyed me because I can't code. So,
cool.
Yeah.
Another question for Toby before we move on to Ben? Gone. Ben, over to you.
Thanks, Nick. You guys are tough acts to follow. So I hope my stories show a slightly different angle on things. I was a management consultant building spreadsheets in London until 2006 and got very bored of that, and I thought, I've got to be my own boss. I can't face the route of becoming a partner in a management consultancy and running on a treadmill, and as Toby touched on, the sort of the cost of your human life and your family life was pretty bleak for people in that world, in any professional services world. So I thought I need to start a business, and I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do, and no idea how to actually hand in my resignation letter to my boss. But I was climbing Mont Blanc in the summer of 2006, and one of the guides was explaining the glacial melt, and said, 10 years ago when he started guiding the glacier was here, and then by the time I was there, it was up here, and he said this global warming thing is real. And at that stage, I'd never really thought about global warming. But I was convinced through that trip that it was a serious issue, and I thought, well, when I get back home, I need to eradicate my carbon footprint, and I couldn't find a way to do it. I got back home and I thought there must be a sensible way of eradicating a carbon footprint in ways that makes financial sense. And in this sort of 21st century lifestyle, because back in those days, people were saying, put another jumper on and turn down the thermostat, and it was all a bit hippie-ish. It was never actually going to make a material difference to the issue. So I thought with a mate one night after work, well, maybe we could build a website and do something in this space. And we built a website one night after work in one of these template things. And it said, do you want to eradicate your carbon footprint in ways that make financial sense? And then the next night we worked out how on Google AdWords to get it right to the top, because in those days it was pretty cheap to get things to the top of Google AdWords. And within a week we had 100 inquiries of people, and we had absolutely no idea how to fulfill any of these inquiries. But it was real live market research, and we picked off half a dozen of them and looked at them and found that there was one in particular. There was a guy in Anglesey who had a farm which had a very high electricity bill, and he wanted to make his own electricity with a windmill, and he wanted to try and find a way to do that. So we thought, well, there's an idea. And so we said, well, let's try and find someone who can help us do that. And in essence, all we did was Google faster than he could. And we found a guy in Holland who was making these windmills, and we imported it, and he didn't have an instruction manual with it or anything. So then I had to work out, in front of this client, how to put up a windmill. And it was one of the most exciting days of my life, because we had absolutely no idea what we were doing. But by the end of the day, there was a massive windmill that we built. It was turning around, and his meter was going backwards. And he was thrilled with it. He was so excited. And so we thought, well, maybe there's a business in this. And so we started selling these sort of car-priced windmills to people, that were, for people in farms who had big electricity bills, of which we found there were quite a lot. And we grew that, and we got that for 2 or 3 years. It grew really well, and then the financial crash happened, and everybody who had stocks and shares started getting very nervous, because of course these very wealthy people who were buying our product. And so we completely retrenched. And we had to start again, and that was really tough to kind of go through that process of retrenchment. But the sort of the next growth cycle we went through, we kept selling these windmills, but rather than selling £20,000-30,000 ticket items, we thought, well, it's the same hassle to put out a piece of equipment which is £250,000 rather than £20,000 or £30,000. And so our customers, £250,000 is a combine harvester, so it's kind of, rather than a small tractor, it was very understandable. And so we started selling these £250,000 turbines to people, but we found people who had lots of money, but they didn't have the right land, because they didn't have any wind, or they didn't have the right planning permission, or couldn't get a grid connection. And then we'd also find people who had great bits of land, but they didn't have any money. So maybe there's a deal to pull these people together. And so we sort of pivoted. This is a story, I guess, of pivots. We pivoted a little bit, and we started then renting bits of land from people who had land, and finding people who had money and doing the deals there. I thought, well, again, there's got to be an easier way of doing this. And so we found a private equity fund, a family fund, who wanted to own a bunch of these windmills. So we started, I guess we moved into something akin to a traditional wind farm model, completely by accident and without knowing what we were doing together. And so we started putting these windmills up, and we realised that while this was happening, that the price of solar panels was falling, much the same way as the price of computer equipment was falling. And it was getting to a stage where, for the subsidy back in those days, it was available for solar farms, 2 ROCs, which had been available forever, suddenly worked because the price had fallen so fast. And so we could start building these solar farms, which we'd seen being built in Spain. And we built those for 3 or 4 years in various different ways, and in a very chaotic environment. And the chaos was driven by the supply chain costs moving very fast, suppliers being very unreliable, promising things and not delivering them, going bust on us after we put deposits with them. It was absolute pandemonium. And culminated in a process of about 2 years where we grew. We went through, I think it was 2010, I'm looking up here because there's 2 guys from my team in the audience, ask them for the real story later if you want. 2010 to 2012, that sort of period of time where we grew from £250,000 turnover to 10 million turnover in 2 years. We had no working capital to deliver this. The money we'd raised from the venture capitalists had put such a lock on our business that we couldn't then raise any more money, and we couldn't find a way of, without having a horrendous devaluation for the team, which would have demotivated everybody along the way. So we were running on fresh air. Every month, the story we've heard is trying to bring the cash in to pay the payroll, and if you've got to the end of that month, you've got to do it again. It's absolutely relentless, and I wouldn't advise anybody to do it unless you're really driven to do it, because it's difficult. It's properly difficult. But coming through to the other end is really exciting, isn't it? So one of the other challenges we had through that period of insane growth is recruitment, as we touched on. We went from 3 people to about 43 people over 2 years. So we're on average 1 every fortnight. We never got to the size of having a proper middle management there. So that meant that most of the recruitment was done by the founders, which meant that we were permanently interviewing. And it's you're permanently shifting through rubbish CVs to find average CVs, permanently interviewing average candidates to find great candidates. And as has been touched on before, it's the quality of your team that makes all the difference, and it's worth holding out for the great person. So my one bit of advice with recruitment is don't recruit someone who's average, wait for the right person, because they'll be with you for a long time, and if they're great, they'll help you get a long way. Equally, if you get the wrong person, get rid of them quickly. So I'll tell you a quick story about that. I had a call one day as I was driving through Wiltshire, and the phone call, of course hands-free in those days, phone call said, can't do that sign, can I, for hands-free? Phone call said, this is Wiltshire Police here, is that Ben Kosh? And I said, yeah. I was like, I've been done for speeding, why are they ringing me, and this is really weird. And they said, do you have, and they mentioned the guy's name working for you, and I said, yeah, we do. He's our finance director. And they said, can you do an audit without him knowing? And I said, yeah. He said, well, we suggest you do that, and we'll ring you tomorrow. And I was like, oh, okay. So when we got back to the office, I went through all of our bank records, which is really hard to do because I'm not an accountant, but I can count numbers up, and I realised that something funny was going on. I couldn't quite work out what was funny, but it was something odd, and payments to suppliers didn't quite add up to what they should have done. So the next morning, I pulled all the power cables out of our finance guy's computer, took the fuse out, so I thought, if you something going on here. And I rang my founder, Rob, in London. I said, you've got to get over to Bristol, we've got to confront this guy, something funny is going on. But I can't do it on my own, I need a witness. So Rob got there for 11, and we just played for time, and then we brought this chap into the office, and sat him down, and I said, Ian, what's going on? And he said, just look straight us in the eye, I said, I've been nicking money off you. Absolutely extraordinary, just completely gobsmacking. And so we went through a process then with the police, and he ended up with 4 years in prison. The reason I tell that story is that recruitment is tough, and you've got to do background checks, and when you're growing, there's no time to do background checks, there's no time to check people out. You've got to find a way of doing it, hopefully without paying daft recruiter fees, because the cost of getting it wrong can be catastrophic. Now, we were lucky. We probably paid, I don't know, 10,000 quid in consultancy fees or something to do the full audit, find out what went wrong, and we just scraped through and stayed alive. But that could have so easily killed us. They nicked, I don't know, 50,000 quid off us, which isn't a massive amount of money, but when you're growing fast and you've got no working capital in the business, it really matters. So we came through that, and I guess came out the other side. We found revenue growth was very hard, not enough working capital. We found that focusing on profit growth was a much more useful thing to focus on, and then we found actually focusing on cash growth is better, because cash brings you some sanity. Because what we were finding is all our profit was getting chewed up in working capital without us really fully understanding what was going on there. So once we understood that focusing on cash growth was the answer, we then realised that there was one part of our business which generated a lot of cash, and another part of our business which used most of our management time and didn't generate much of the cash at all. So we got rid of it very fast. We just offloaded, and we were a bit sneaky with the team. We thought, well, we were 40-something people at the beginning of this process. We thought these are the great part of our team. Let's have them all in the part of the business which is profitable. All the other guys we sold off one day, and so we were left with a much smaller, tighter team, which is miles easier to manage, and much more cash generation. And from then, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's a lot easier once you've got a business model which is just generating cash, and you're just trying to hone it and tweak it and play with it. So I'd encourage you all, start with the end in mind, but be agile and nimble along the way to find the part of the value chain which is going to generate cash for you, because that's actually what matters, and will hopefully deliver you lots of money at the end of the process.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ben. I went to Edinburgh Festival last August, and we watched a whole load of comics. And not saying these are comics, of course, but the trick for a great performance is, of course, to get the end bit to link back to the first. And one of the common bits between your two things was this finance piece and understanding finance. People make the business, but you need the finance to work. And however good your FD is, or not, you as a director have to understand at least the basics of finance, which is the point you made about finance, the non-financial manager. So I think there's a key learning while I think of it. And the IOD do excellent courses on finance for directors, and that was that ad break. Okay, so any particular questions for Ben, first of all?
Done a bit of time in the car industry, and your comments about your first client, when you connected the windmill to his meter, with cars in mind, did you connect it the right way around?
I guess we must have done because the meter went backwards for him, which he was thrilled about. And it took several months. The lovely follow-on story from that is that the network operator is then you're supposed to ring them up and say, I've got this thing, my meter's going backwards. And they're then supposed to put a digital meter in, which only goes forwards. And so the network company said, we're going to put a digital meter in. And then the network company missed the appointment. So they then sent him £100 for missing the appointment for the inconvenience of it. So he just thought this whole thing was wonderful, to get money from these people rather than paying them money.
Cool. Any other questions?
I was just going to ask, you didn't say anything about how you created the culture. I was wondering around what your why was, given that you sort of transitioned this business from sort of chaos and so forth. What was the why that kept people going?
So we had a great hook for recruitment and motivating people, that we were trying to have an impact on the global warming story in a way that made some financial sense. And so I think we used that quite a lot in recruitment, and we recruited some great people who were really solid, cultural, trustworthy people. We spent some time trying to develop culture, but my main observation of culture is the people were the hardest bit of it. And so our decision was, rather than trying to improve the culture, which we spent some time on that, but not an awful lot, was just to get the headcount back down again and focus on cash generation rather than headcount generation. And one of the debates we had as a team is, are we trying to build a business which is for our egos, just to prove we built a massive business, or are we trying to build a business which we can exit at some point and hopefully make some money out of? And so we were very then focused on, actually, we're doing this to try and generate some cash for the founders.
Do you have any comments, words of wisdom, lessons learned on fundraising? Sounds like you brought in external funding. You were commenting about some of the difficulties in cash, but just in terms of that, I'm sure there's lots of experiences there.
Yeah, so I guess it's worth adding to answer your question, the exit process as well. We hired a corporate finance team in Bristol, and we did loads and loads and loads of meetings in London, which cost us lots of money in train journeys. I hope we didn't plug into the engine shed, which was my biggest regret in the whole process, because the engine shed and the Set Square team are much better at helping businesses through that process now. At the early stage, there's things like Bristol Private Equity Club, which help people at very early stages. And we tried very hard to sell the business many times. Probably, I don't know, these guys don't know the full details. So. But what we found is whenever we tried the business, the community we were trying to sell to, we were arguing about the price. They said, if it works, we're going to make this much money, but if it doesn't work, we're going to make that much money. And we could never agree a price. So what we found was actually the finance community wanted to be our customer, and they wanted to invest in things we made rather than invest in us. And so again, it's about that pivot to try and present, as any sales team would, try and present to the customer, the financing team, what they want in a structure that they want to see it.
Simon.
Just a quick question. You mentioned when you looked at the business over the years, kind of 80 years, sort of like 80-20 rule, where one side was making a lot of money and was relatively straightforward, and then the other side did not. Again, can you perhaps just give a bit more info on what that was, and kind of what the light bulb moment was for you that made you realise that?
Well, I guess the specifics to our business won't be relevant to anybody, but to answer the question, what we found was that it was the windmill business which was giving us a lot of turnover, using up a lot of working capital and using 99% of the management time, whereas the solar business, we could generate 95% margins from it. And at our peak, we reckon there were 3,500 people in the solar industry in the UK, about 100 of which were doing what we were doing. So the competition was ferocious, but we managed to find that there was a particular part of the value chain, which if we controlled that, we could take the value from the entire value chain in negotiation power. So it's a question I put to a lot of businesses I speak to is, how are you going to own the value and not be destroyed by competition, not be destroyed by your customers or your suppliers trying to nibble more of the value chain?
Okay, I'd like to open it up now, and let's have an open conversation with our three experienced panellists about really what have been the challenges of a scaling CEO. So I'm going to ask one first while you think of your questions. To each of you, what has been your most painful moment in that growth? Heather?
I think my most painful... Thank you.
Got my tea.
My most painful moment was there there had been some changes to funding, and you have to submit a data field which then actually gives you the money back halfway through the following month. And we had managed to get one code in there wrong. And there was sort of an uneasiness about, oh, actually, we're making more than we expected to be making, and that should have been a really big alarm bell. And then we realised, and literally it wiped £1 million off of the profitability overnight, down to practically zero at that point in time. And that was very painful. One, knowing it was going to hit cash, and how do you manage that cash, but also how do you refocus the business. So that was my lots of nights of no sleep at one point in time.
It's what you call the oh shit moment, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Toby?
Actually, probably something very similar. It's a much smaller amount of money. When we were setting up the agency that was supposed to make money and just make money to fund all the other activities, we did a deal which within 4 weeks of signing the contract, I realised I'd done a bad deal, and rather than producing lots of cash flow, it started hemorrhaging cash flow. I think it was about 100 grand out of our cash flow, which was a lot when you only got a 1.5 million turnover. That was a very that caused a lot of stress, and thankfully we got out. I think we were £5 up, I think, by the end of the contract, but we didn't die, and but that was very, very difficult, actually.
Ben?
I think the most painful moment of the process was trying to do the fundraising, which took longer than I anticipated to do, and trying to close that, whilst at the same time my wife, who was pregnant when I started raising money, actually delivered a baby by the end of the process. And so having a small baby in the house while we were trying to close the fundraising and getting enough sleep through that process was immensely challenging. So, we've all touched on sleep here. Sleep management is really important for people who start businesses. It's the welfare of the founders. It matters.
So the follow-on question, which is perhaps tough, and don't answer if you don't want to, is what really was the emotional toll, the emotional price to pay for?
I don't want to sit here and sound like some sort of sad sob story, but it really hurts when you're massively sleep deprived and you've got to make big decisions that are important, and you've got not nearly enough time in the day to make all the decisions, let alone deal with the emails or the 102 voice messages that come in while you're trying to answer the emails. The prize is worth it, but I tell you, back in 2010, if I knew in 2010, if I'd known in 2006 when I started it how hard it was going to be in 2010, I wouldn't have started it.
Either of you want anything to share?
Yeah, I suppose we had two moments actually of stress. The first one was would have sunk the company. We got out of that one, but the other one was when we basically signed we weren't cash positive, so we were still burning money when we were acquired, and we were going after a big prize which will materialise in 2019. Apparently, when the government opened up all the banking APIs. And we were dependent on funding, so we'd spent a lot of money going through. We hired corporate advisors as well to find the right people, and we were in advanced stages of due diligence with MMI. So I said to them that I needed to go and do due diligence on them because I thought that looked good, and so I got on a plane with my then soon to be boss, and we flew out to Johannesburg for me to go and do due diligence on a 17,000 strong corporate, and armed with my pen, and the stress of that process. I wasn't sleeping. I remember sitting in the bath, just completely almost having heart palpitations. And anyway, got to 36,000 feet, somewhere in the middle of Africa, and basically I started feeling ill, and I thought I was having a heart attack, and I collapsed on the plane on the way out there. And I woke up in the kitchen. So I went to the toilet. Woke up in the kitchen in the kind of galley floor of the plane, and the stewardess was very nice, and they put me on oxygen. I was thinking, how am I going to process this? My boss isn't my guys on the plane. How is this going to play out? And anyway, the co-pilot was very nice. He came and saw me, and as my wife pointed out, he's a doctor. He wasn't being nice to me. He was seeing whether he needed an emergency land the plane.
Yes.
Anyway, cut long story short, I recovered enough. I went and slept it off in business class, which was an excellent way of getting upgraded. And then I had to appear back because it was a night flight in my seat, so that my boss, he said, "Oh, are you okay?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I was a bit ill in the night, but I was fine. I went and slept off." But yeah, I was thinking this is awful. And then went straight into 36 hours of virtually straight through meetings, and then subsequently I found out that apparently a lot of people collapsed on the plane to South Africa because predominantly it is a run predicated by an awful lot of overweight insurance executives who regularly fall over on the plane, and so I'm glad to be one of those.
Anything, Heather, to add?
The only thing I would say, and just add to that, is the challenge as a CEO when you've got a really difficult thing to deal with is you've got to run those two things, because internally everything's going, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? How do I get out of this? But externally, you've got to present that image of, I've got a solution. We are going to get through this, and you've got to take people with you. And those two sides that are constantly fighting, you need to find a way of releasing that. And it's a challenge. It comes back to those sleepless nights again, and how do you deal with that as you go through?
Right, questions on the back?
Yeah, so just on that note, actually, Heather, how do you deal with the pressure? How do you, obviously you've got the work, but then you talk about personal, how do you actually manage that?
I think trying to find a way that you don't always take it back home, because going back to your family are really important. Not so much now, but certainly I used to do a lot of running. I used to find that was a good way of just de-stressing, especially at the end of the day. And when I needed to make decisions, I used to go for a walk. And I think one of the other things that causes stress is if you've got lots of decisions that you need to make, but you're not making them. And so they just build up and up and up and up. So there were certain times where I just felt I needed to find a solution, and literally I'd walk around the downs, and by the time I got to a certain lamppost, that was my key. I needed to have sorted it all out and actually make that decision. So trying to get decisions made, give yourself space to do that, such that it doesn't just keep building up and up and up, and try not to take it back home too much.
Unless you've got anything particular to add, I'll go on to the next.
I just add one point to that. And, each of our physiology is different, but for me, it was really important to get the balance of booze and coffee right, and exercise too. And what the balance is different for everybody, but it matters.
Yeah. Booze comes in a minute.
So as your businesses grew and you moved from just a startup outwards for that phase, what was the biggest thing you as leaders had to upskill on, and how did you do it?
Go on, you've got mine.
So I didn't do an MBA. I did it on the cheap. I read books whenever I was on the train. And one of the books I read which is amazing, is by the Kaufman Foundation, who do a lot of entrepreneurial stuff, called Leading at the Speed of Growth. And in that, it talks about behaviour change of the leadership team as a business goes through each phase. And so you move from being a doer, where you're having to actually do most of the stuff, to being a decision maker, to being a coach and a sort of mentor and a policy maker. And it's a very, very different style of leadership. I'd recommend that book to anybody who's trying to navigate those behaviour changes. It's called Leading at the Speed of Growth.
Cool, that's the reading list. Biggest learning, personal learning thing?
It's definitely the people thing. I naturally am on the more salesy end of the spectrum, so I find it easy to cast vision. Getting to people to execute in the way that meets my vision, I found very hard. I don't like doing exams, I don't like reading books as such, and I found for me going on leadership conferences where they were either speakers talking and lots of video and stuff, and I picked up learning points, and that whole, for me, it's interactive learning, whereas going and doing something that's quite dry and academic didn't work for me. And then I could then take that and literally, people would joke about it, I'd walk back in and the whole thing would change, and we'd be doing the latest leadership technique, and some of it worked, and we got through, and yeah, so and you learn off other people as well. That's the thing. If you bring a great team in, you suddenly see that the latest red hot person coming in, the entire team are pulled up, and because it gets competitive, and that's the thing. The best way of learning is hire someone better than you. That's if there's one piece of advice I can give, do not be insecure enough. Just always hire someone better than yourself. That's there.
And the only thing I'd add to that is better than yourself, but also that loves doing the things that you don't.
Yeah.
If you can get that combination for your number two, don't go for somebody who's the same as you. It would be a challenge. Go for somebody who's completely the opposite with completely the opposite skill sets, because then you complement each other and work well.
And that's really difficult to recruit to. Really difficult. Which is why I get somebody else to help with the recruitment. Peter.
Sure, the book is it's by the Kaufman Foundation, and it's called Leading at the Speed of Growth. They've got a whole series of books which are all worth a look, but that's the one I used a lot.
Ash.
Sounds like you guys have all taken on investment during your business journey at some point. I wonder, with hindsight, as the CEO and the decision maker in the process, I wonder whether you could tell us whether it was the right time, and if you may have avoided it in hindsight, and when is the right time?
Did you get the investment at the right time?
For me, it did happen at the right time, but actually I'd had 2-3 year plans before that point with a view to exiting. And I guess each time I got to the point of saying, actually, no, it's not the right time to exit. Sovereign Capital actually approached us about 2.5 years before we sold to them. And we realised at the time that whilst it was a fantastic offer, it was a life-changing amount, it wasn't what I felt was right. And I believed in the growth and we could achieve a lot more later on. 2.5 years later, they offered us 5 times that amount, so it's worth taking that bet. But I guess I got to that point where it then felt right. And for me, it was when, as an entrepreneur, you are taking risks. It is that environment where you're taking risks all the way through. For me, it got to a point with, as a single mum with a daughter, I wasn't taking the same level of risk as I did when the business was a lot smaller. And I knew that at that point I needed to take some cash off the table rather than have it all tied up with that business. So I was driving that decision for me personally, and hence the steps that followed in terms of the different working with private equity was that balance in terms of what I was looking to achieve. So, lucky maybe in terms of the timing, but it's got to be right for you, because it is a change. It's not just, when you get an investor in, things change in terms of the dynamics of the business. And, as you said earlier, Toby, that whole risk bit, they see risk very differently than you do.
For me, my angel round was out of necessity, so I'd love the luxury of saying that, but we would have gone bust, and we raised it in 2 tranches with a combination of equity and debt, but basically it was about $500,000 all in. And the Series A, we were ideally looking to raise between 3 and 5 million, and ideally up to the upper end of that, and we ended up getting acquired in the process, which gave us access to the central treasury of the main of the mothership. So the question at the time for me was, have you sold out too early? And I think at the time, timing is everything in business. 1 minute something's hot, something's not, and the competition. And I think I've met quite a few entrepreneurs who have sold their businesses. Some of them are bitter, some of them are ecstatic. I think the reality is that the future realities that you can extrapolate out are many and varied, and you're generally very good at not spotting your weaknesses. And so for me, that was a good deal at the time. Would we have gone on to build something very different? I mean, I could make all kinds of different hypotheses, and we may have raised lots more money, and we may have built a very strong business. But actually, for me, I wanted some cash off the table, and also there were I wanted to gain experience working in a corporate, actually, which I'd never done, and both of those worked really well. And was it the best for the business? I mean, I think time will tell with that one, but ultimately it was. I try and avoid sort of that whole thing of that. I think you've just got to be quite ruthless about where you're at right now and what is your motivation. Coming back to what's your why. If your why is to when lots of stuff starts flying around, you've got to really be clear about what you want. And actually, is it to pay your mortgage off? Is it to build the biggest business? What's really driving you? and actually those sorts of things are quite key to understand, really.
Anything to add, Ben?
No, those are great answers.
Any other questions? Yes. Go on, you go first.
I had a question about team. You've talked a lot about how important it is to have the right team and the culture between the teams. So as the business grows and you begin to focus in on what your proposition is, if you end up with people that are part of that team but not necessarily have the skills and capability to go in the direction you now need to go, I mean, what's your advice on handling that in a situation where you maybe have to ask them to step out?
I lose them quickly. There's a lot of people I thought about for a long time. When we changed them for the right person, my response was always, I wish I'd done that. The moment I'd had the thought, we would have saved so much time and hassle. So looking back, I would have been much more brutal, moving people on, or putting them in the right seat on the bus, or getting the right people there.
I think Ben's obviously a better leader than I am. I think for me, the only thing that I agree with him completely, the only difference is that we had one individual, because when the business starts to accelerate, generally people can't train, so you end up hiring people in over people, and generally the people at the beginning are generalists, and businesses then require specialists. And so you just cannot evolve. The only roles actually are leadership roles, which are generalists, and they don't really know what they're doing anyway. So kind of because you own the company, it's fine, you're still there. And I think that process of we had one individual who basically we managed to tick through, and what we did with him is we managed to move him into a less fast-moving stream, and he then was able to develop at a better speed. A couple of the people we had to shed, but for one or two of the people you go through, that first 10 people you have in your team, you build deep relationships with them. It's hard. It's really hard when you're faced with that. So I would love to think next time I'll be that ruthless, but I'm not sure. I don't know. They're quite deep relationships because you go on such a journey together. So, but then again, maybe that's my weakness. I don't know.
You're a nicer guy, though, too.
I'd agree with both of those comments. It's incredibly hard when people have been with you since the beginning, but sometimes you have to make those hard decisions. The only advice I can give you there is one person told me, make decisions with your head, but implement them with your heart. So you've got to work out with your head, disengage the heart, what's best for the business, but then put the heart back in terms of the conversations that you have, and think of ways. Sometimes people will actually thank you for having that conversation with them because they know that they're getting out of their depth. They just don't know how to deal with it. And if you can deal with it sensitively, sometimes it can be done in a sort of win-win way.
You had a question?
Yes, sir. Hello, I'm John. Would you do it again? And if so, what would you do differently?
Brilliant.
Me? What would you do?
So I did it the first time around because I was bored and I wanted an adventure, and I got an adventure. And now I'm still involved on a very tiny little bit in the business. But when I'm completely out, I'd do it again because it's whilst I say it's tough, it's actually quite fun as well.
Yeah, it is a game, and I think the one thing that's different is I think when the powerful motivation to feed your family is very, very powerful. When you need to make it work, and especially if you're in an innovation-based business rather than necessarily a service business, innovation usually comes from duress, in my experience, usually. And so I think there are lots of second-time entrepreneurs that think when you look back with rose-tinted glasses, it was easy. Yeah, well, there's the romance of it. Do you remember that time when we were running out of money and it's great and everything else? Let's do it again. And so I think you've just got to. I think that it is a game. It is a lot of fun, and I think the problem is when you stop doing that. And we've had that conversation before. Being a non-exec is not as fun as being an executive, but it's a lot nicer lifestyle. And so it's kind of there isn't necessarily an easy thing. And so I'm not quite ready to go and start another business yet. Whether I am in a year's time, maybe, don't know. So, but it is a lot of fun, but it comes with a price.
Heather, would you do it again?
I guess I have, because I started 2 new businesses. I guess I'd do it differently. Building that business when you've not got the cash behind you it takes a huge amount out of you. I guess doing it a second time round, one, you've got the experience to know when you're doing it wrong again. But also you can do things, you can hire people in, I guess at a slightly higher level that you're not able to do when you do it the first time round. So, you know, when you are a very new business, it's really difficult to persuade people to come and join you and sell that vision. It is slightly easier the second time round because at least you've got that track record in terms of what you've done the first time. But I sat for quite a while not doing anything, and I just wanted to get back in and do something. So yeah.
I guess your point also comes a bit about the second time around. It's about self-confidence as well, isn't it? About how confident you feel about selling your idea and your vision.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to draw to a conclusion. There is opportunity afterwards for networking, and I'm going to ask you for a final answer, which I'm going to give you a gap while I do some other stuff. But while you just think about it, what is your single piece of advice, real advice, to somebody about to take this journey? So, some of the takeaway points for me, as we know already, I certainly knew, it's all about people in the business at leadership level, culture level, learning from people within the business. I love the piece about hire somebody better than you and learn from them, absolutely critical. Alignment of interests, which is in the culture in the business, the focus of activity, but also the investors. We've got lots of horror stories of misalignment there. The momentum of the business and therefore the dependency on the founder, and then the pressure on the founder, the responsibility that brings, and perhaps the personal toll that brings. And the importance of understanding finance in the business, the difference between cash and profit, for example, really, really important. And know your why. Love that one. So, final question. Single piece of advice, Ben.
It's really tough because you just summarised it all. So I guess the single piece of advice is the most important insight we had was when we could find a business model that gave us that maximum cash generation for the working capital in the business. And then we could just spin that out very fast. We generated a lot of cash. And everything until then was just mucking around and experimenting, and I wish we'd got there faster.
For me, is actually your last point is knowing your why. Ultimately, business is about achieving something. Yes, it's about making money, but it's often a lot more about what you want to do personally. And when I suddenly realised that it wasn't down to somebody telling me what success looked like, it was me defining what I wanted to do. That for me was when I started to understand that was quite transformational for me.
I think Toby's point about know your why is a really, I think, resonates for me today. But also know why people are going to buy from you, and why you are better than your competitors, or why, if it's something new, why are they actually going to need it? And if you understand that and then can align your vision to what you're trying to achieve, keep reworking it, keep revisiting it, so that you're ahead of that innovation curve and driving that forward.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. I'd like you to all join me in thanking our speakers. And in particular, not just because of their contribution this afternoon, but all three of these are giving back in some way, either investing, supporting this kind of activity, or giving back. And that's really important. I think it's a really critical component of our ecosystem here in the Bristol and Bath area, that we've got some great people who are willing to give back and help everybody else on their journey. So thank you very much for that. I hope you found it interesting. A bit of fun, but also important. You've got some nuggets out of all of that you can take away and either use straight away or a bit further, or it helps you understand some of those knotty problems that you've got in your own organisations. Thanks for coming. It helps bring out some of these gems, these nuggets. Thanks to sponsor, which is Engine Shed. We didn't have a commercial sponsor this time. It's Engine Shed. That is funded by people hiring our meeting rooms, etc. So the money comes back in to fund things like this. So that's my plug. I encourage you to register for the next event. Come and give our 6 candidates, because we've got all 6. They only had 5 last night. We've got all 6 lined up, fingers crossed, and come and give them a hard time and really make sure that the voice of our sectors are represented. And we have a newsletter to keep up to date with the event. It's on the website. You can sign up or leave your business card here. So thank you very much, and I really hope you enjoyed it, and best of success with your businesses in whatever stage they're at. Thank you.